yoke of their errors, is moved to wake them up, he is supported by the supernatural power of the transformation Buddha and will attain realization. But there is no such realization for those who are simply addicted to the immediate deeds. But he will have realization who, understanding the doctrine that all things are no more than the manifestations of mind, abandons the view that there really is a world of particulars where the body, property, and the abode are distinguished, cuts himself off from the idea of an ego substance and what belongs to it, befriends good companions whenever and wherever they are met who will induce him to another world, and is able to release himself from the faults of self-discrimination. It is thus said, "Thirst is indeed the mother, and ignorance is the father, when from the understanding of an objective world there rises Buddha knowledge. The passions are the arhat, and the 5 skandha aggregates are the brotherhood. As these and no other immediates are to be destroyed, here is indeed a set of deeds called immediate." In this quotation I wish to draw the reader's attention to the reference to Nirmita Adhisthana. The term is somewhat casually introduced here, but the idea indicated here is an important one. For it shows that there has been since the early days of Buddhism a notion that not only the Tathagata but even a bodhisattva when he reaches a higher state of spirituality is able to manifest himself in a variety of forms if necessary for the welfare and salvation of all beings. If a bodhisattva wishes to save a wretched drunkard, for instance, he may turn himself into one of his companions if he thinks that is the best way to approach him and awaken him from the wretchedness of his position. For when the bodhisattva remains in his original purity and saintliness, the drunkard may not come within the range of his moral influence. Like seeks like. And consequently drunkards find it easier to associate with one another, they hate a mixed society, especially with him who is decidedly opposed to them and openly anxious to save their souls. So in Buddhism, the bodhisattva in his apparent transformation puts on the garb of a drunkard himself and mixing himself with his bacchanalian friends he awaits a chance. Perhaps he may show that he has been regenerated and raised to a higher plane of spirituality. His friends may now wonder how a drunkard could be so reformed, and so on. When this wonderment is once grafted into the consciousness of his drunkard friend, the bodhisattva will redouble his efforts. And, making use of his skillful means, see to it that the grafted idea at first occupying only an obscure corner of the intoxicated consciousness, a former friend pf the bodhisattva, strike root gradually, steadily grow, and finally cause a sudden awakening in the soul that was hitherto in a most wretched state of spirituality, or rather of non-spirituality. This bodhisattva who in this case has proved to be an instrument of salvation is said to be a transformation body of the Tathagata led by his supernatural power. The skillful means he has resorted to here is technically known as samanartheta, engaging in the same work, which is a kind of proletarian morality. The aristocracy of saintship cannot penetrate into the depths of an ordinary soul, and to understand this a bodhisattva has to become an ordinary character himself. The doctrine of Upaya is an interesting one in the evolution of Mahayana Buddhism. The thought is organically and intimately connected with the great compassionate heart that constitutes the center of existence. 3. The 6 Paramithas. This is one of the marks most characteristically distinguishing the Mahayana from the Hinayana. In most Mahayana sutras the 6 Paramithas are stated specifically as meant for bodhisattvas. All the virtues that are meant for bodhisattvahood are included herein. And, indeed, it was as the result of the 6 Paramithas that the Buddha was able to gain the grand enlightenment about 2,500 years ago. If he did not practice all these virtues to their utmost in his past lives he would never have gained an insight into the truth of existence. Paramitha may mean either reaching the other shore, or perfection. In the Chinese sutras it is in most cases left untranslated as the 6 Paramithas are charity, morality, patience, or humility, energy, or strenuosity, meditation, wisdom, or intuitive understanding of the ultimate truth of things. The Lankavatara gives 3 kinds of paramithas: worldly, superworldly, and superworldly in its highest degree. The worldly kind is practiced by worldly people who cling to the idea of an ego and what belongs to it. They are unable to shake themselves off the fetters of dualism such as being and non-being, and all the virtues they would practice are based on the idea of gaining something material as a reward. They may gain certain psychic powers and after death be born in the heaven of Brahma. The superworldly kind is practiced by Sravakas and Pratyekabuddhas who, clinging to the idea of nirvana, are determined to attain it at all costs. They are like the worldly people who are attached to the enjoyment of egotism. The paramithas that are superworldly in the highest sense are practiced by a bodhisattva who understands that the world is dualistically conceived. Because of the discriminating mind, and who is detached from erroneous imaginations and wrong attachments of all kinds, such as mind, foro, characters, etc. He would practice the virtue of charity solely to benefit all sentient beings and to lead them to a blissful state of mind. To practice morality without forming any attachment to the condition in which he binds himself, this is his Silaparamita. Knowing the distinction between subject and object, and yet quietly to accept it without waking any sense of attachment or detachment, this is the Bodhisattva's Kshanti Paramitha. To exercise himself most intently throughout the night, to conform himself to all the requirements of discipline, and not to evoke an discriminating mind. This is his Virya Paramitha. Not to cling to the philosopher's view of nirvana and to be free from discrimination, this is Dhyana Paramitha. As to Prajna Paramitha, it is not to evoke a discriminating mind within oneself, nor to review the world with any kind of analytical understanding, not to fall into dualism, but to cause a turning at the basis of consciousness. LT is not to destroy the working of a past karma, but to exert oneself in the exercise of bringing about a state of self-realization. This is Prajnaparamita. 4. The four dhyanas. The classification of dhyana under four heads has been treated previously in my essays in Zen Buddhism, and I will not repeat it here except to quote the gathas which appear after the prose. There is dhyana that surveys the meaning, dhyana practiced by the ignorant, dhyana depending on suchness, and the tathagatas pure dhyana. The practicer may see while in meditation something in the shape of the sun or moon, something like a lotus flower, or like the lowest region. He may see something resembling the sky or fire or a picture, or something heaped up. All these forms, a variety of things, but lead the yogin to the path of the philosophers, and make him fall into the realm of Sravakas and Pratyekabuddhas. When all these are abandoned and he is in the state of no shadows, all the Buddhas will come together from their lands and with their shining hands anoint the head of the blessed with unguents. His mental state is in full conformity with suchness. Further down there is another statement concerning the attainment of the dhyanas. All the dhyanas, apramapas, arupas, samadhis, the cessation of thought, all these are mental constructions, nothing of the sort is really attainable. The fruit resulting from the life of a srotapanna, of a sacred agaman, or of an anagaman, or of an arhat, all this is mental confusion. The dhyana practiced, dhyana itself, and the subject of dhyana, the abandonment, the seeing of the truth, all this is discrimination. He who understands is released. 5. On meat eating. The motive for having this chapter appended to the Lankavatara, when it has no organic connection with the text proper, seems to lie in a passage towards the end. According to it, the Buddha evidently dislikes the idea of being thought of as the one who has permitted meat eating among his followers. He says, there may be some unenlightened followers of mine after my death, who, not knowing the spirit of my teaching and training, may wrongly conclude that I allowed them to eat meat and that I myself ate it. This would be disastrous. For how can those who are abiding in a merciful heart, disciplining themselves, in asceticism, and trying to follow the path of Mahayana, tell others to eat animal food? Indeed, I have elsewhere given rules as to the eating and not eating of meat. 10 rules for avoiding and 3 rules for accepting it. But in this Lankavatara as well as in the Hastakakshya, Mahamegha, Nirvana, and Angulamalika Sutras, meat eating is absolutely forbidden. Not only in the past, but in the future and now, all my followers are to shun animal food no matter how it has been prepared. If there is anyone who would accuse me of eating meat myself and allowing others to eat it, he will surely be born in an undesirable region. Holy people refuse to eat even the food of ordinary people, how much more so with meat eating. Their food is the food of truth. The Tathagata's Dharmakaya is supported by that. According to this, there must have been the accepting of meat food among the followers of Buddhism in the time when the Lankavatara was compiled. Evidently, the Buddha did not object to their eating it if the animal was not especially killed for them. This caused unfavorable comments among the other religions. For instance, the Lokayatas and the Buddhists naturally did not like them, and this must have started the new effort to prohibit meat eating altogether among the Mahayana advocates. The following are the reasons for not eating animal food as recounted in this sutra. All sentient beings are constantly going through a cycle of transmigration and stand to one another in every possible form of relationship. Some of these are living at present even as the lower animals. While they so differ from us now, they all are of the same kind as ourselves. To take their lives and eat their flesh is like eating our own. Human feelings cannot stand this unless one is quite callous. When this fact is realized, even the Rakshasas may cease from eating meat. The Bodhisattva who regards all beings as if they were his only child cannot indulge in flesh eating. The essence of bodhisattvaship is a great compassionate heart, for without this the Bodhisattva loses his being. Therefore, he who regards others as if they were himself, and whose pitying thought is to benefit others as well as himself, ought not to eat meat. He is willing for the sake of the truth to sacrifice himself, his body, his life, his property. He has no greed for anything. And full of compassion towards all sentient beings and ready to store up good merit, pure and free from wrong discrimination, how can he have any longing for meat? How can he be affected by the evil habits of the carnivorous races? This cruel habit of eating meat causes an entire transformation in the features of a bodhisattva, whose skin emits an offensive and poisonous odor. The anime are keen enough to sense the approach of such a person who is like a Rakshasa himself, and would be frightened and run away from him. He who walks in compassion, therefore, ought not to eat meat. The mission of a bodhisattva is to create among his fellow beings a kindly heart and friendly regard for Buddhist teaching. If they see him eating meat and causing terror among animals, their hearts will naturally turn away from him and from the teaching he professes. They will then lose faith in Buddhism. If a bodhisattva eats meat, he cannot attain the end he wishes. For he will be alienated by the devas, the heavenly beings who are his spiritual sympathizers and protectors. His mouth will smell bad. He may not sleep soundly. When he awakes he is not refreshed. His dreams are filled with inauspicious omens. When he is in a deserted place, all alone in the woods, he will be haunted by evil spirits. He will be nervous, excitable at least provocations. He will be sickly, have no proper taste, digestion, nor assimilation. The course of his spiritual discipline will be constantly interrupted. Therefore, he who is intent on benefiting himself and others in their spiritual progress, ought not to think of partaking of animal flesh. Animal food is filthy, not at all clean as a nourishing agency for the bodhisattva. It readily decays, putrefies, and taints. It is filled with pollutions, and the odor of it when burned is enough to injure anybody with refined taste for things spiritual. The eater of meat shares in this pollution, spiritually. Once King Simhasadasa, who was fond of eating meat, began to eat human flesh, and this alienated the affections of his people. He was thrown out of his own kingdom. Sakrandra, a celestial being, once turned himself into a hawk and chased a dove because of his past taint as a meat eater. Meat eating not only thus pollutes the life of the individual concerned, but also his descendants. The proper food of a bodhisattva, as was adopted by all the previous saintly followers of truth, is rice, barley, wheat, all kinds of beans, clarified butter, oil, honey, molasses, and sugar prepared in various ways. Where no meat is eaten, there will be no butchers taking the lives of living creatures, and no unsympathetic deeds will be committed in the world. Sanskrit Chinese English Glossary